Hi, I'm Kala. My parents said I was too secretive, so they punished me by secretly spending $96,000 on my credit line for my sister's Hawaii honeymoon. When I found out, my mom just shrugged and said, "It's your punishment, you cheap girl." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just froze every account they touched. But that wasn't even the worst part. Because what they stole wasn't just money. It was trust, history, and the last piece of home I had left. Want to know what I did next? And who showed up begging? Before we dive in, what time are you listening and where from? Drop it in the comments. This one's personal. I'd only been home for 3 hours when the first alert came through. Bank of Westmont, your automatic utility payment of $212.19 has failed due to insufficient funds. I blinked at the screen. Then again, that couldn't be right. The place was still quiet. My suitcase still zipped by the door. Montana had been restorative. 3 days of silence and sketchbooks. No email, no family. I hadn't spent a dime outside the retreat, yet here I was, in my own kitchen, holding a mug of cold tea with my phone buzzing like it owed me answers. By the time I logged into my banking dashboard, my stomach was already braced for something bad. But even bracing didn't prepare me for what I saw. A string of charges, a blur of dates, room service, spa, helicopter tour, Hawaii, and at the bottom, $96,437, $12, all billed to my gold business card, a card I hadn't used in nearly a year, a card that, as far as I knew, still lived in my home safe. I nearly knocked over the tea. I grabbed the key, dashed to the back hallway, and flung open the small lockbox. There, neatly stacked, my passport, old jewelry from my grandma, a few backup keys, but no card. Gone. Gone, like it had walked out on its own. Gone, like someone had reached into my house while I was gone and decided it was theirs. And then it hit me. 2 weeks ago, Mom had said she'd stop by to water the plants. I hadn't asked her to. She'd just texted, like it was some act of grace. Back then, it seemed harmless. I even said, "Thank you." Now I stared at the safe like it had betrayed me too. I pulled up the number on the back of my Platinum and called the card company. "Hi, this is Kala Elridge. I need to report unauthorized charges on one of my accounts." The agent was polite, a little too casual for what I was feeling. He verified my address. "Wait," I said, frowning. "Can you confirm which address the charges were authorized from?" He paused. "It matches your home address. That's why the flag didn't trigger." Of course it did. Of course they used my address. I ended the call politely but shakily, walked to the window. The neighbors were hanging string lights across their porch, sipping white wine, living in a world that didn't just unravel beneath them. Mine had. Out of muscle memory, I opened Instagram. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe a distraction, maybe some quiet decor photos. Instead, I saw her, Lacey, straddling a chaise at the Halekulani in Oahu, champagne in hand. "Family time in paradise," the caption read. I tapped. Next photo. Mom smiling beneath a massage cabana, then Dad, midair in a parasail, legs dangling like some carefree retiree. And me? I was tagged. I was tagged. It was my card, my money, my name. But I hadn't been there. I hadn't even been told. I stared at that screen for so long, the sun outside faded. By the time I moved again, the room had darkened, shadows stretching like guilt. I drove, didn't even grab a coat. My parents lived 22 minutes away. I barely remember the road, just the blur of headlights, the growing buzz in my chest, the numbness in my fingers. When I pulled into their driveway, the porch light flicked on, automatic. But nothing about this felt routine. Mom opened the door like she'd been expecting a package, not me. "Kala," she said, voice flat. "You should have called." I stepped inside. No hug, no "how was your trip?" Just the same dull beige living room where I'd once been told not to make a scene. "You took my card," I said. She blinked. "It was never just yours." "That's not how credit works." "Well, if we're being technical," she sighed, Your father and I gave you everything growing up. It's only fair you give back. By letting you charge $96,000 without telling me?" Her lips twitched. "You wouldn't have understood." My voice cracked. "Try me. You always hold on to things, secrets, grudges. You made us feel like strangers. So maybe we thought, maybe you needed a little nudge, a reason to be part of this family again. Consider it a correction." "You call this a correction?" I said. "This is theft." That word made her flinch, just a little. She turned her back and muttered, "You're so dramatic, just like your aunt." And then, "You always made us feel poor, like your little job made you better than us." "I design homes," I said quietly, "not palaces in Oahu." Dad walked in then, not a word, just a glance between us, then down at the carpet. He looked at me once, opened his mouth, then closed it. The silence cut deeper than anything Mom said. Then came the icing. Lacey appeared at the top of the stairs, barefoot, glowing. "Hey, sis," she grinned. "How's Montana?" "Oh, wait, don't answer. I already saw the photos. Looked boring." She sipped from a wine glass. "Anyway, thanks for the trip. You've got great taste in resorts." I stared at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel heat or rage or even betrayal. I felt nothing. I turned, walked out. The drive home was silent. I didn't even turn on the radio. About 5 minutes from my place, I reached into the glove box for a tissue, and my fingers hit something, a small box. White, worn. I hadn't seen it in years. Inside was a card, birthday, maybe 7 or 8 years old. No signature, no note, just 3 words. Maybe next year. It had hurt back then. Now, it felt like a thesis. When I got home, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I turned on the lamp, logged into my dashboard. I whispered, "Let's see how they survive without my silence." The moment I pressed send, "Don't regret it later. Too late." I felt something shift in my chest. Not exactly peace, but clarity. I turned off my phone, dropped it face down on the kitchen counter, and sat still for a few seconds, letting the silence settle in like dust after demolition. Then I moved. I pulled out my laptop from the credenza, the one I only used for finances, and logged into my business dashboard. No rush, just methodical, like I was checking the locks on every door before leaving town for a while. I disabled the secondary gold card completely, canceled every auto link tied to it. Then I took it a step further, locked the Joint Wire Transfer Authority, updated all recovery access codes, and turned on 2-factor authentication with my private secure line. I wasn't just cutting them off. I was reclaiming what they assumed was theirs. That card, my card, was never meant for spa days and champagne in Maui. It was supposed to be a safety net. Years ago, after my father's mild stroke, Mom had called me crying, said she worried about what would happen if something happened to them while I was away for work. She asked me to link one of my business cards to their household accounts, just in case, she'd said, for rent, for groceries, for meds. Only you could do this right, honey. And back then, I believed her. So I set it up, because no matter how cold she ran sometimes, I thought caring was just messy in our family. Not absent, but I left a breadcrumb trail of every transaction. Every authorization had to ping back to me, even if they didn't know it. I stared at the frozen account. The balance had been cleared down to $211 before I cut the cord. Only you could do this right. The words circled in my mind like smoke around a candle flame. I hadn't thought about that moment in a long time. The way she held my face, eyes glassy, voice trembling. "You're the only one we trust, Calla." That line hits different when you realize trust was never the issue. It was entitlement. It was around 4:30 when the bank called. I let it ring twice before answering. "This is Calla." "Hi, this is Denise with Capital Financial. Just confirming, you initiated the full freeze on the gold business card ending in 8391? "I did." There was a pause, a click. Then her voice lowered slightly. "Ma'am, we've had 17 declined transactions since the freeze. Do you want us to continue rejecting?" I didn't hesitate. Absolutely. Let it all bounce. Understood. For your records, they attempted salon payments, a Porsche lease, and 3 separate mobile plans, one of them under the name Lacey G. I swallowed a dry laugh. Keep declining. It was petty, maybe, but it was also just the first ripple. I closed my laptop and poured myself a glass of water, watching the golden light begin to fade through the blinds. Outside, everything looked calm. Maple trees barely swaying, my neighbor's dog curled up by the fence. You wouldn't know a storm had started. I waited until night fell before turning my phone back on. The screen lit up like a siren. 26 missed calls, 12 voicemails, 8 texts from my father, most of them variations of, "Call me when you can." But it was the voice notes from my mother that I opened first. "Calla," her voice hissed through static, "you didn't have to make this dramatic. We are family. Do you understand what you're doing? Lacey has kids. You're jeopardizing their stability, all over a misunderstanding." She paused. Then, in a lower voice, one she probably thought sounded softer, "I know we've had tension, but this is cruel. You're better than this." No, I thought, I'm just not cheaper than this. I saved the voice messages, one by one. My hand didn't shake. My eyes didn't burn. I'd cried enough over years of being the designated afterthought, the family backup plan, the one they remembered only when it was time to clean up or pay up. I didn't write back. Not at first. I drafted 4 responses, deleted all of them, but I wasn't done. Instead, I attached a PDF, just under 2 megabytes, titled Summary of Unauthorized Charges, $96,437.22 USD. I wrote one sentence beneath it. The bank suggested I file a fraud claim. Should I? I hit send and exhaled. Not a dramatic sigh, not a shaky breath, just release. The kind that comes when you finally tell the truth without asking for anyone's permission. An hour passed. Nothing. Then, as I was folding laundry in the living room, the porch sensor light flicked on. Footsteps. Hesitant, then heavier. A rustle of cellophane. I peeked through the peephole, and there she was, Caroline, my mother, holding a bouquet of grocery store flowers and a smile so fake it made my skin itch. She rang the bell, knocked once, then started pounding. "Calla," she sang out, voice syrupy. "Let's not drag this out. You're being emotional. We just need to talk." Her smile didn't reach her eyes, and that's when I knew. She wasn't sorry. She was scared. That night, Mom showed up, banging on my door, holding a bouquet from the grocery store and a smile that looked like it might crack under its own weight. I didn't flinch. I didn't even look through the peephole. I already knew who it was. "Calla, sweetie," she called through the door, her voice high and sugary like fake syrup. "I thought maybe we could talk. I brought your favorite lilies." I opened the door halfway, just enough for her to see my face and the chain still latched. "You don't have to do this," she added quickly, eyes darting to the hallway like she was checking for an audience. "Families borrow. That's how we survive." I met her gaze, steady. "I'm not your backup plan." Her grin faltered. That phrase must have landed deeper than she expected. Or maybe, just maybe, she knew it was true. I stepped outside, shut the door behind me, and turned the lock with a firm, final click. The sound was louder than it should have been in the quiet hallway. She blinked at the closed door, then turned to me as I stood just a few feet away, barefoot, calm, arms folded. "You're overreacting," she said, clutching the flowers like they were proof of goodwill. "You always take things too far." That line. Always that line. Somewhere in my chest, the slow burn reignited. Not rage, just tired clarity. I took a slow breath, then another. Steady. "Funny," I said. "How too far is what you call boundaries." She sighed heavily, letting the bouquet drop to her side. "Calla, you're not married. You don't have kids. You have a good job. What else are we supposed to do? Lacey's got her hands full. The kids need internet. Your father needs his medication." I raised my eyebrows. "So, I'm just a walking wallet?" She didn't answer. just looked at me, lips pressed tight. But I caught it. The faintest flicker of resentment in her eyes, the kind that said, "You were supposed to keep funding this family machine quietly." Across the hall, the neighbor's door cracked open. Mrs. Leonard peeked out, her nightrobe still wrapped in a towel from coloring her hair. She didn't say anything, just watched. Mom saw her too and immediately lowered her voice. "This isn't the place. Let's go inside. Talk like adults." "No," I said. "You wanted public? Let's stay right here." There was a long pause. I reached into the folder I'd tucked behind my back and handed Mom a plain white envelope. She hesitated. "What is this?" "Just a little something for the record." She opened it slowly. Her fingers trembled. Inside was a spreadsheet, printed on thick paper, color-coded, every entry labeled: utilities, lease payments, salon memberships, even Lacey's iCloud family plan and the payments for a designer stroller. All from one card, my card. Then a business card, my lawyer's. And finally, a neon yellow sticky note in my handwriting. "If you call me cheap again, be ready to explain this in court." She went pale. For a split second, I was 8 again, standing in our living room, trying to hold back tears after Lacey knocked over Mom's antique vase during one of her tantrums. I remembered the way Mom had turned to me, not her. "Calla," she'd said sharply, "just say sorry and stop being cheap about things. It's just a vase." Back then, I didn't know what it meant, but it stuck. It followed me through every family holiday, every skipped birthday call, every time I covered someone else's tab and got nothing but a passing thank you. Mom's voice cracked through the memory. "I didn't mean it like that back then. You know how things get said." I said nothing. She tried again. "You're acting like we stole from you. We're family." "No," I said quietly. "You're acting like family means I should have no boundaries. That's not love. That's dependency dressed up in guilt." Mrs. Leonard cleared her throat softly, then pulled her door shut. The silence hung between us. "I haven't filed anything yet," I added, watching her eyes flicker with a new kind of panic. "But the bank said I'd have a solid case if I do. Every charge is traceable. Every favor, you called it, documented. This was never help. It was exploitation." She opened her mouth again, but no sound came. The paper in her hands began to crumple. I turned without another word and walked back toward my door. Calm, measured. Just before I stepped in, I paused. "Oh, and if Lacey needs her car back, the lease company has my permission to call directly. They've been trying to reach you." Then I stepped inside and closed the door. Click. Not a slam, not a dramatic goodbye, just final. The next morning, just as I finished pouring a second cup of black coffee, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I almost ignored it, assuming it was Mom again, but the name that popped up made me freeze. Mr. Alton Greer. I hadn't heard that name since Dad's funeral. He was my father's old friend and our family's longtime probate lawyer, someone who used to call me kiddo and sneak me peppermint bark from his coat pocket every Christmas. "Calla?" His voice still had that slight southern drawl. "Sorry to call you out of the blue. Something came across my desk this week. I think you need to see it." I straightened up. "What kind of something?" "A draft. A version of your dad's will. Unsigned, yes, but your name's in it. A good chunk, actually." I blinked. "Wait, I thought there was no will. That's what my mother and sister claimed." He paused. "That's exactly why I'm calling. This version was created 6 months before your father passed. Time-stamped, stored in our system. It was never finalized, but it's not nothing." I walked toward the window and pulled back the curtain. It was one of those sharp, sunlit mornings where everything looked clearer, even the lies. "Email it to me," I said quietly. "Please." He promised to send it right away, and he did. 5 minutes later, it landed in my inbox. A scanned document, marked as draft number 3. I opened it on my laptop, my hands resting heavy on the keyboard as I read. 40% of the estate. That's what Dad had set aside for me. Not a symbolic gesture, not a leftover slice. 40%, in black and white. The second clause was even harder to swallow: the gold family card for emergency purposes, available to all children with joint parental consent, not free reign, not a blank check for Lacey to book spa weekends or designer handbags, and right at the bottom, in my father's precise handwriting, Calla has been the most financially responsible of my children. I trust her judgment with family assets. My stomach clenched. I hadn't even known he wrote that, and he never got to tell me. But Mom? Lacey? They'd stood in our kitchen after the funeral and said, "He never filed anything official. We checked. It was just a mess." They lied. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of the betrayal sink in. Not just the money, not even the manipulation. It was the silencing. The years of erasing my place in this family, slowly, strategically. My mind drifted back to the funeral. I hadn't let myself think about that day in a long time. Lacey had sobbed so loudly, it felt more like a performance than grief. Her cries were dramatic, chest-heaving, drawing looks from every corner of the chapel. And Mom, Caroline, she stood tall, giving a rehearsed eulogy about Elias Granger as if she'd adored every inch of his soul, about how he loved family more than life, while I sat there in the second row, quietly holding the photo Dad and I had taken in Yellowstone just 2 years prior. When I stood up to say something, just a few honest words about him, Mom touched my wrist and whispered through clenched teeth, "Not now. You're just going to upset people." I remember how I froze, not because I agreed, but because in that moment, I realized they didn't want my truth. They wanted a version of Dad they could spin into a story without me in it. That was the day something in me started to shut down. Now staring at this draft will, that moment burned brighter than ever. I didn't call them. I didn't scream. I didn't march over with accusations. I just reopened my budgeting spreadsheet. Yes, I still keep track of every dollar. And I added a new tab, Gold Card Transactions. For the next hour, I went through every monthly statement I had access to. They'd assumed I wasn't watching, that I was still the quiet one who'd let things slide. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I flagged purchases, hotel stays, plane tickets, a diamond bracelet from a boutique in San Diego, and then one charge caught my eye. 4 Seasons Resort Oahu. I booked under Calla V. Granger. I hadn't been to Hawaii since college. I squinted at the date, just 4 months after Dad passed. 3 rooms, ocean view, spa services, meals billed to the room. I opened my photo app, scanned back to that month. Nothing. I'd been in Chicago, at a tech conference, and yet someone had used my full name, my credit link, my father's death, to take a beach vacation. I texted Mr. Greer right then. If we can prove they suppressed this will, and someone used my identity, does that change anything? His reply came almost instantly. If assets haven't been fully dispersed and we can establish misrepresentation or forgery, then yes, everything changes. My hands were steady now. I forwarded him the spreadsheet I'd built, every questionable charge labeled and categorized. Then I clicked on the resort's website. My pulse was calm, not cold, as I selected a flight for tomorrow. No one knew I was going. Not my mother, not my sister, not even my co-workers. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. I stepped off the plane with nothing but a shoulder bag and the quiet knowledge that something inside me had changed. I wasn't here for vacation. I wasn't here for closure. I was here for clarity. The warm air hit me like a memory, humid, fragrant, deceptively soft. A place like this was meant for rest, escape, luxury, and yet every footstep I took through the open-air terminal reminded me of how my name, my identity, had been weaponized behind my back. I didn't waste time. A short taxi ride later, I stood in front of the 4 Seasons Oahu, staring up at the very hotel that had billed me nearly $10,000. I walked through the entrance slowly, as if stepping into a house someone else had built with my keys. At the front desk, a young woman greeted me with a polished smile. "Aloha, Miss Granger. Welcome back." I blinked. Excuse me? She tilted her head, then gestured to the screen. We have you in the system already. VIP status. Would you like a glass of our hibiscus welcome tea while we check you in? I couldn't decide if I felt dizzy or insulted. I accepted the tea. We have you in our signature ocean view suite, she continued, typing swiftly. The same room as your last stay, booked with luxury spa credit, children's activities, and private pool access. My grip on the cup tightened. And the name on that reservation? She pointed to the monitor. Calla V. Granger. Full payment processed through our concierge platform. Would you like me to resend the confirmation email? I nodded, lips pressed together. She assumed I had forgotten, that this was a return trip, that I was the woman who'd sipped Mai Tais here 4 months ago while my card took the hit. But I wasn't. They led me to the room with care. Every staff member I passed smiled like they knew me. One even waved and said, "Welcome back, Miss Granger. Your kids looked like they had a blast last time." I didn't respond. Inside the suite, the view opened like a postcard. Blue waves, sun-drenched lounge chairs, swaying palms. There was a beach tote hanging on the hook by the door, branded with the resort's logo. A complimentary gift for returning guests. The irony made my stomach turn. I sat on the edge of the bed, took out my laptop, and pulled up my notes. I opened my encrypted folder titled Legal Hold and started documenting everything. Dates, charges, room details. Then I called the front desk and asked to speak with the manager. He arrived 10 minutes later, crisp polo shirt, clipboard in hand. "Miss Granger, so nice to meet you again. How can I assist?" I didn't waste time. "Can you walk me through the billing history from the last reservation under my name?" He looked surprised but professional. "Of course. May I ask, was there an issue with the previous stay?" "There was no stay," I replied. "Not by me." His smile faded. "I see. Give me a moment." He returned with a printed folder. "Here's the billing breakdown. Suite for 5 nights. Spa package titled Mom and Me. 1 adult, 1 child. In-room dining, 4 guests. Poolside cabana charges. And here," he pointed, "the signature on the spa authorization form." I leaned in. The handwriting was unmistakable. Lacy. I didn't say anything at first, just breathed in slow, letting the waves outside fill the silence. Then I asked the next question carefully. "Do you happen to retain security footage from that week?" He hesitated. "We do, but it's not something we release without legal cause." "Understood," I said. "Would you be willing to review it, just to confirm who actually used this room?" He agreed. While he left to consult with security, I scrolled through old voicemail messages on my phone, most I'd never listened to. I'd ignored them that week after the funeral. Too raw, too drained. Then I heard it. "Hey, Cal. Hope you're doing okay. I know things have been heavy. Just wanted you to know I love you, and I'm thinking about you. Talk soon, okay?" Lacey's voice, soft, sweet, sent the very day she was lounging poolside under my name. I stared at the phone like it might apologize. 10 minutes later, the manager returned with a discreet knock. "We checked the footage," he said quietly. "Your sister and her family were on the property. Poolside, spa, multiple amenities, all linked to your account." I stood up slowly. "I'd like all the receipts emailed to me, including the signature scans. And please note this for record, I'm filing a financial fraud complaint." "Yes, ma'am," he said, voice lower now. "Would you like us to flag your profile to prevent future usage?" "Immediately." Back inside the room, I logged into the resort Wi-Fi and canceled the open card. Then I saved every document, labeled each file by category. I even downloaded the voicemail and attached it to the folder, evidence, not emotion. I sat back and exhaled. People think silence means surrender. That being the quiet one makes you soft, forgettable, but silence can be strategic. I'd been called invisible, passive, too sensitive. But right now, I was a file folder away from burning the lies down, and I wasn't raising my voice to do it. As I zipped my bag to leave, a bellboy approached with a small package. "Miss Granger," he said, holding it out. "Your family left this at the front desk after checkout. Said it was for you." I took it warily. Inside the cloth gift bag, a folded note in familiar cursive and a wrinkled receipt. The note said, "Mom said you'd understand." And beneath it, a receipt for a $9,800 jewelry store charge, paid in full on my father's memorial card. For a second, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. They hadn't just stolen a vacation, they'd stolen dignity, memory, identity, and now they were trying to leave me with the tip. I didn't go home, not right away. After landing back in Seattle, I went straight from the airport to the bank, my coat still damp from the plane's condensation, my shoes echoing on the marble floor as I walked in with the packet of evidence tucked under my arm. It was early, barely past opening hours, but I couldn't wait. A young associate greeted me with a chipper, "How can I help you today?" I handed her the folder. "I need to speak with someone from the fraud division. This is urgent. I have full documentation, charges, signatures, and proof the card was used without my consent." She flipped the folder open, and her smile faltered slightly. "Let me get someone from upstairs." 10 minutes later, I was in a small glass-walled office, seated across from a man in a navy vest who introduced himself as Marcus. He took his time reviewing the paperwork, eyes scanning each receipt, each printed screenshot from the hotel's cameras, each email I had forwarded. I sat quietly, not because I had nothing to say, but because silence had become my sharpest tool. "I can't imagine how frustrating this must be," Marcus finally said. "And you're saying the individuals who used this card were family?" I nodded. "My parents, my sister, her children. They used my name, my credit, my father's memorial card. They didn't even ask." Marcus exhaled. "We'll get this escalated. You'll receive a fraud claim ID within 24 hours, and we'll launch a formal investigation." "Good," I said, then paused. "Also, I want to cancel that card and freeze any shared accounts I still have. Checking, savings, any lingering family trust links, all of it." He looked up. "Are you sure? That might affect joint access?" "I'm sure. And I need to update all my passwords. I'd like to schedule a full financial lockdown. Today." It took 2 hours, but when I walked out of that building, everything was different. The card was gone. My accounts were secure. The family trust I'd been tied to since I was 19 was frozen with a pending review. For the first time in years, I felt like I owned my name again. I got home around noon. The apartment was quiet, just the soft hum of the fridge and the comforting creak of floorboards under familiar weight. I put my bag down, made tea, and sat by the window with my laptop on my knees. By the time I opened my phone again, it had already begun. First, the buzzing, then the notification flurry. "Lacey, what are you doing?" "You froze the accounts? Are you serious right now?" Then my mom, "Calla, we need to talk." "You think punishing us makes you better? That's not love, sweetie." And then my brother, who hadn't said a word to me in months, "You're acting like a child. Grow up. This is embarrassing." I stared at the screen for a while, didn't type anything back, just muted the thread. By late afternoon, the phone rang again. A call from Mom. I let it buzz once, twice. Then I picked up. Her voice came through like syrup at first, sweet and slow. "Hi, honey. I was hoping we could talk. There seems to be a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," I said, cutting in quietly. "You used me. Again. You didn't ask. You didn't warn me. You didn't care." Her tone snapped. "Oh, come on, Calla. It was just a little help for your sister. You weren't even using the card. Why are you being so dramatic and selfish?" "Selfish?" I repeated, still staring out the window. "You know I worked 3 jobs in college to pay off that card? I skipped birthdays. I didn't travel. I built credit while everyone else was drinking in Cancun." "You always keep secrets," she hissed. "You hoard money. You isolate. You've never truly been a part of this family." There it was. The real voice. The one she reserved for when kindness didn't get her what she wanted. "And now," she continued, voice sharpening, "you're punishing us? Like some bitter, cheap little girl who can't handle being second to her own sister? I didn't yell. I didn't even flinch. I simply said, "Goodbye, Mom," and ended the call. The silence afterward wasn't peaceful. It was surgical. I sat there for a moment staring at nothing before logging into my personal trust portal. I remembered there was a clause, a legal one I'd skimmed past before, one that said once I reached 30, the trustee role shifted and I could elect to sever all guardianship links. I was 32. I clicked through the forms, initiated the request, set everything in motion with the same calm, cold efficiency my family used to erase boundaries. I wasn't going to argue anymore. It was evening now. The sun dipped behind the skyline. I stood up, stretched my legs, poured another cup of tea. Just as I brought the mug to my lips, my phone lit up again. This time, a banking app notification. Withdrawal attempt denied. Account frozen. Then, almost immediately after, a voicemail pinged in. Lacey's voice. Broken. Frantic. "Kala, what did you do? We're stuck at the airport. The kids are crying. We can't get a car or a hotel. Everything's been declined. We have nothing. Please, just call me. Please." I didn't move. The cup of tea in my hand was still warm, the lamp beside me casting a gentle glow across the room. I was alone, but not lonely. I played the voicemail again, and this time I smiled. I played that voicemail again, and this time I smiled. Not out of cruelty, but out of something colder, cleaner, the kind of clarity that comes when every bridge behind you has burned and the smoke finally clears. I set my phone down, screen still glowing with Lacey's missed call. Then I powered it off. For the first time in what felt like a decade, there was stillness. No buzzing, no dings, no guilt-laced text bubbles, no one asking for a quick loan or to "put it on your card, sweetie, you're doing so well." Just the faint hum of my apartment heater and the soft tap of rain against the window. I put on my coat and stepped outside. Pike Place smelled of salt and roasted coffee. The air bit through my sleeves, but I welcomed it. Tourists milled about, snapping photos by the gum wall or juggling hot chowder in paper cups. I didn't stop anywhere. I just walked. Past the vendors, the flowers, the baker slapping dough behind fogged glass. I watched people live lives that didn't revolve around pleasing others to avoid being discarded. By the time I got home, my shoes were soaked through, but my head was clear. I sank into the old armchair by the window, my coat still on, and stared out at the sound. Then, almost without thinking, I pulled out the box from under my coffee table. Not the one with financial papers. The other one, dented at the corners, sealed with a fading blue ribbon. Inside were pieces of me I'd tucked away over the years. The first thing I found was a folder labeled UC Tuition Savings. It was barely an inch thick. I opened it to see the balance when I was 15, $27,000. Notes from Grandma scribbled in the margins. For Kala's books, dorm deposit, and one sticky note that said, "She deserves it all." But it was empty now. I remembered the day that account vanished. I was 15. Dad said, "We had no choice, honey. Lacey's cafe fell through." She was heartbroken. Mom chimed in, "You'll get scholarships anyway, won't you?" I didn't argue. I just nodded. And later that night, I cried into a towel so no one would hear. Another paper slipped out. A photo from Lacey's wedding. The glossy kind you get from a professional. She was beaming in her white dress, flanked by Mom and Dad, arms around her waist. I had paid for the entire venue deposit. But I wasn't in a single picture, not one. Not even the group shot. I had worn a navy dress that day and sat at the table closest to the kitchen. My name tag read, Table 11, +1. I wasn't allowed to bring a guest. Lacey had said, "We're keeping it intimate." I kept digging. At 28, I got my first apartment. It was a shoebox, but it was mine. I didn't tell anyone where I lived until Mom showed up one evening, spare key in hand, groceries in her arms. "Surprised?" she said, like it was a joke. "You left the lease papers on the counter. I made a copy just in case." She walked in like she owned the place, rearranged the spices, opened my fridge and frowned. I laughed it off then. I'd stopped finding it funny years ago, But the one that stung most, the memory I could never file away, was from just 2 years ago. Everyone had flown to Hawaii. I found out through Instagram. There they were. Poolside photos, tropical drinks, even matching t-shirts that said, "Ohana forever." Mom, Dad, Lacey, her kids, her husband. Even my cousin Jenna made it. I had surgery that same week. Nothing cosmetic. A real one. I'd listed my mother as the emergency contact out of habit more than hope. She never picked up. A day later, my father texted, "Didn't want to stress you out? Lacey needed this break. You understand." I did. I understood exactly where I stood. That week, I recovered alone in a shared hospital room while they posted photos of shaved ice and sunset dinners. The buzz of reality pulled me back as I sifted through a stack of legal documents. I'd scheduled a meeting with a legal aid clinic earlier that morning, and after explaining the situation, the young attorney looked at me like I had spoken another language. "They used your social security number to open secondary lines?" she asked. "Yes." "And your sister listed her children as dependents on your insurance?" I nodded. She blinked. "That's identity fraud, potentially a federal offense." I didn't flinch. "Can we document it?" She handed me a highlighter. So we did. I returned home with a thick envelope, my name printed neatly across the front. I laid it out on my dining table, next to receipts, screenshots, bank statements, all of it forming a web I hadn't realized had been building for years. I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I just started sorting. Page after page, I marked the lies in yellow and betrayal in red. My apartment was silent except for the scratch of ink. Then I saw it. An old Gmail folder I hadn't opened in years, one labeled Grandma. Curious, I clicked. It was like opening a window to sunlight. Her voice came alive in every sentence. "You are not hard to love, sweetheart. Your sister's loudness doesn't make your quiet any less powerful." And one that stopped me cold. "You don't owe your light to anyone who tries to dim it." I read that one 3 times. Grandma had been the only one who saw me, the real me. We used to bake lemon bars in her kitchen. I'd steal the corner slices. She'd wink and say, "Those are for the ones who do the hard work." Tears pricked my eyes then. Not out of pain, but from remembering what it felt like to be loved without condition. At the bottom of the folder there was a scanned PDF. Inheritance clauses, private. I opened it. What I found wasn't just legalese. It was protection. A clause buried halfway down, in Grandma's neat, precise language. In the event that a named beneficiary demonstrates behavior of financial abuse, coercion, or exploitation, a secondary heir may be granted full allocation, pending documentation and proof. She named me, not Lacey, not Mom, me, a fallback plan, for if they ever showed who they really were. I sat in that silence a long time, long after the rain stopped. Then I picked up my phone, reopened my voicemail. Lacey's voice, still crying, still pleading. I hit replay one more time, and as the final seconds played out, I pressed the contact button for Grandma's attorney, the one listed at the bottom of the inheritance document. The phone rang. When the receptionist answered, I said just 3 words, "I'll activate it." I ended the call and sat still for a moment, staring at the corner of my coffee table. The hum of my refrigerator was the only sound in the apartment. Outside, a fog had started rolling in off the sound, swallowing the edge of the skyline. I stood up slowly, rolled my shoulders back, and reached for the manila folder that had been sitting on my bookshelf for days now. This was it. The next morning, I found myself in a quiet, unassuming office building in the University District. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor, where a small brass plaque read, "Klein and Martin, Financial Law." A woman in her 60s, with soft curls and navy glasses, greeted me in the lobby. "You must be Calla. I'm Mary Ann." Her voice was steady, not warm, but not cold either. She was the kind of woman who'd seen too many people come in battered and leave a little less broken. We sat across from each other in a conference room lined with filing cabinets and framed certificates. I laid everything out, The highlighted documents, the fraudulent filings, the insurance misuse. She didn't flinch. "You did your homework," Marianne said, flipping through a set of records I had printed the night before. "Clause 17.3 of your grandmother's trust. It's valid. The wording is airtight. If betrayal is proven, the assets redirect automatically. No court dispute necessary, only notification of activation and confirmation of breach." She tapped her pen. "Do you have a record of how the funds were misused?" I handed her the stack I had labeled Lacey, credit abuse and parents, SSN misuse. She nodded slowly. "You've got more than enough. And if I may say, this was filed and documented better than some cases I've seen with full legal teams." I almost smiled. I didn't tell her that 4 years ago I sat in a very different courtroom in front of a very different judge. I was younger then and terrified, but I testified against the senior executive at the firm I worked for after I uncovered a scheme where he siphoned money from employee retirement accounts. Everyone told me to stay quiet. I didn't. I filed reports, collected evidence, and walked straight into federal court. I wasn't thanked. I was laid off within 6 months. But I remembered how to do it. That experience had taught me that silence doesn't protect anyone, but the right kind of silence, it can bring an empire down. Later that afternoon, I scheduled a mandatory Zoom call with my parents, Lacey and her husband. I didn't ask if they were free. I just sent the invite. At 4 p.m., I clicked join. Their faces filled the screen like a poorly staged reunion. My mother had her eyebrows drawn too high, the way she always did when nervous. My father looked like someone had just told him he was being audited. Lacey was eating a protein bar, bored already. Her husband, Derek, leaned back like he was waiting for a customer service call to end. I didn't greet them. "I'm here to inform you that I've officially submitted legal documents to activate Clause 17.3 of Grandma May's trust." There was silence. Then the screen erupted. "You can't possibly do this to us," my mother gasped. My father's face flushed purple. "Do you understand what you're saying, Calla? That clause wasn't meant for family squabbles." "Squabble?" I said evenly. "You used my name to open credit lines. You let Lacey list my social security number as an insurance dependent. That's fraud. That's betrayal. That's Clause 17.3. This is punishment," Lacey shrieked. "Over what? One trip you didn't get invited to?" I stayed quiet for a moment, then said softly, "It's your punishment for keeping secrets. That's what you said to me, remember? When I was 17 and you found my college acceptance letter before I told anyone. You told me I should have been more grateful. Then you gave my tuition to Lacey." My father began to say something, but I cut him off. "I don't need your apology. This isn't a conversation. It's a notification." Their mouths moved, but I stopped listening. I muted them. Marianne had warned me it might feel empty, not the revenge, but the vacuum afterward. She was wrong. It didn't feel empty. It felt finished. That night, I made tea and opened the folder labeled Final Actions. It had 3 things: a freeze on Lacey's lines of credit tied to my identity, a fraud report filed with the insurance board, and confirmation from the IRS that the misuse of dependents had triggered a red flag on their filings. And at the top, confirmation from the bank. Grandma May's beach house now legally belonged to me. So did the safety deposit box in her name. And the house in Hawaii, the one they used every other winter? Their names had been quietly removed from the deed when the trust activated. That place had always been Grandma's gift. But the money used to fund it? Turns out it had never come from my parents. It had come from Grandma's dormant fund, one she set aside decades ago, labeled for emergency redistribution. My parents hadn't gifted Lacey anything. They used funds that weren't theirs. And now, those funds were under my name. I didn't feel rage, not anymore. I didn't feel like proving anything to them. They wouldn't understand it anyway. I sent one last email. Subject: Confirmation of Trust Activation. Body: Please be advised all documents have been submitted and processed. No further communication is required. Then I clicked Send. I walked to my front door and closed it gently. Not a slam, not a dramatic exit, just a quiet motion. But sometimes, silence is the loudest thing they'll ever hear. The silence that followed didn't echo. It settled, like dust in a room that hadn't been touched in years. I stood by the window, watching the Zoom screen fade to black, the last face gone. My hand rested on the laptop lid, but I didn't close it right away. It wasn't hesitation. It was peace. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to prove anything. That same evening, I boarded a late flight. No grand send-off, no farewell party, just me, a carry-on, and the feeling that something long overdue was finally in motion. By mid-morning the next day, I stepped barefoot into the house I hadn't seen since the funeral. The beach wind slipped through the half-open shutters, and the air inside smelled of salt, lavender, and old wood. Just like I remembered, my grandmother's house, now mine. The floor creaked in the same familiar spots. I let my toes sink into the old woven rug by the window seat, the one where I used to curl up with library books as a kid while Grandma May sipped lemon tea. Outside, the tide was pulling in slow and steady. Inside, it felt like the house had exhaled. I didn't feel triumphant, just rooted, like this place had waited, quietly, for me. In the back bedroom, where the morning light always spilled across the bed, I opened her sewing chest. I wasn't sure why, maybe habit, maybe something deeper. Inside, among spools of thread and a thimble still rusting at the edge, was a folded piece of stationery. "To whoever is still standing," the front read. My throat caught. I unfolded the letter, careful not to smudge her cursive. Her words weren't long, but they felt like they'd waited years for me. "If the kindest one ends up alone, make sure she knows she wasn't forgotten. She was protected." I didn't cry, not then. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed, letter in hand, and let the silence speak again. All those years thinking I'd been invisible, when really someone had just been keeping watch quietly. She knew. She always knew. By early afternoon, I'd unpacked only what I needed: one suitcase, a kettle, my laptop. The rest could wait. I was slicing a lemon in the kitchen when the intercom at the gate buzzed. I walked to the screen, not expecting anyone. My heart didn't race. It slowed. It was my father, alone. No suit jacket, no flowers, just a worn manila folder tucked under his arm. He looked older than I remembered, thinner around the shoulders, gray creeping further into his hairline. His tie was loosened, like it had been a long drive. I stepped out and opened the gate part way. "You came all this way?" He cleared his throat. "We lost our pensions. The IRS. They're holding everything. Lacey's accounts, too." I nodded slowly. "I figured they would." He shifted his weight. "I'm not here to fight." "No," I said quietly. "You're here for relief, not for an apology. There's a difference." That landed. His mouth moved like he wanted to argue, but didn't. There was a pause. He extended the folder slightly. "Just documents. In case." I didn't take them. Instead, I looked him in the eye and said evenly, "If you ever need to speak to me again, it'll be through counsel." He looked at the porch rail, not at me, but he didn't protest. "And if Lacey contacts me again, I'll move forward with pressing criminal charges." His jaw tightened, then dropped. "I don't hate you," I added, not out of mercy, but clarity. "But I don't owe you access to me, not anymore." For a long second, he didn't move. Then he turned around without another word and walked back to his car. He didn't even look over his shoulder. I didn't slam the gate, I just let it shut behind him. Soft. Final. That night, the beach was quiet except for the low hush of waves. I lit candles in the dining room, pulled out the simple dishes Grandma used for guests, and set the table, not for family, but for the people who had shown up when I had nothing. Sarah, the paralegal who'd stayed late with me to read trust language line by line. Raymond, my old supervisor who'd defended me during the workplace case. May, the barista from down the block in Seattle, who always gave me tea on the house when I looked tired. Even Mrs. Ellison, the neighbor who once left a basket of cookies with a note that read, "I see you." It wasn't a large table, but it was full. We ate fresh bread, soft cheeses, and a big salad tossed with herbs from Grandma's old garden. I told a joke about the time I thought a sea urchin was a lost tennis ball. They laughed. I laughed. No one here was keeping score. No one here expected repayment. It wasn't the family I was born into, but it felt like one I could finally choose. Later that week, without telling anyone, I submitted a new application, a foundation, under Grandma May's name. Its sole purpose? Funding scholarships for girls like me, girls dismissed, doubted, and drowned out in their own homes. Smart girls, kind ones, the ones who stay quiet too long before they rise. No, I didn't get revenge. I got something better. I got to walk away without needing to be asked back. Have you ever had to choose between peace and family? What did you choose? And was it worth it? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone.